Well, hello and welcome to our latest episode of Security Noise. Today I have Kelsey and Travis joining us from the Trusted Sec Consulting team, as well as myself and our producer Skylar Tudor, and we're here to talk China decoupling with you. Time is running out for TikTok is our show title for the day. Of course, TikTok is everyone's best loved, most feared, most trusted, or certain to be a CCP PSYOP social media platform. We'll discuss ByteDance and some other big Chinese tech firms that have attracted the ire, or at least the attention, of our executive, legislative, and regulatory bodies on today's show. Kelsey, Travis, you guys like to take a minute to say hello?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Great to be back. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to our discussion today.
Hello, everyone. Travis here from the Targeted Ops team. Just thankful to be joining.
Skylar, do you want to take a minute to greet the people yourself?
Sure. How's it going, everybody? Skylar Tudor from Trusted Sec.
Right. Well, Skylar, of course, will make sure our show sounds great today, as well as join in our conversation. I'll kick things off by going through kind of a list of some of the major companies that have at least had some sort of action taken or at least been in the news on this subject. Huawei was probably one of the first ones. As you guys know, they're in smartphones, telecommunications equipment, and network solutions. They have been placed on the entity list, which prevents them from supplying critical components and software to a lot of government. ZTE, again, telecommunications equipment, smartphones. I don't believe they're on the entity list, but they have been placed with some export restrictions. So if you're a U.S. firm, you're not allowed to sell certain things to ZTE. SMIC, semiconductors, same thing, added to the entity list a while back. DJI Innovations was one I had not heard of, but if you guys are into drones or some of these little robotics things, maybe you're familiar with them. That seems to be their primary business. And I don't know how to pronounce this one. Hikvision Digital Technology. Again, a lot of security cameras and things of that nature. IoT devices related to monitoring and detection of physical things. The Lenovo Group. People remember the ThinkPad, and that's where that ended up, acquired from IBM for a while. They are not on the entity list, but they are restricted from providing products to military and intelligence agencies. Finally, Lexmark International, printers and imaging solutions, of course. A lot of us have probably had a Lexmark printer somewhere along the way. They have been acquired by foreign governments, including China, and their technology products are restricted again to U.S. military and intelligence agencies. DeepSeek, been in the news a lot lately on the AI front. Again, artificial intelligence applications, a lot of Gen AI, LLMs, things like that. A bipartisan House effort has introduced legislation to ban federal employees from using the application. And the DeepSeek app has been seen sending a lot of telemetry back to servers in China. TP-Link, again, smart home devices, cable, DSL routers, switches, Wi-Fi routers, things of that nature. No specific restrictions other than, again, some limited purchasing by the federal government or rules against it, rather. But there have been some additional inquiries into as if they are involved in violating pricing rules and other trade restrictions that may give them an unfair advantage in the American marketplace. So, guys, running any of this equipment, have anything from any of these organizations?
Yeah, you go through that list, Jeff, and I see a few of those brands that stick out, things like Lenovo, SMI. The big one being TP-Link. I use those little wireless network adapters all the time for our wireless research and whatnot. If they have the sub-brand of Casa Smart Home, I've got a handful of smart plugs, things of that nature that I use too. But to kind of go into it, I take certain steps and precautions when I use those devices. I'll let you guys comment. Who else uses those devices?
I have a Huawei Fitbit type thing. And of course, I've used TP-Link stuff in the past, but at the moment, I've just got the Fitbit, which obviously has health data and that sort of thing, but it's pretty limited.
So the Chinese Communist Party knows your current heart rate?
Yep, it knows my step count. It probably knows my weight. Oh well.
Well, I mean, it is interesting. I mean, certainly a lot of these companies, have released devices. We mentioned DeepSeek's mobile app a little bit ago, and certainly some of the TP-Link stuff, if you connect it to the cloud, sends a lot of telemetry back to the manufacturer. That isn't really out of step with what a lot of other products by, Western vendors do in terms of sending that telemetry. But you have to acknowledge that there is considerable actionable human intelligence from a lot of that stuff. I mean, some years ago, there was a lot of concern about, Fitbits on military bases and stuff like that as a way to track movements. We've seen NixGeek and stuff demonstrate, just how much of that kind of information you can generate off things like presence information, just from Microsoft Teams and things like that, which is not really germane here, but the same concept in that if you know where people are, when they're logging in, when they're logging out with something like a Fitbit, you maybe know when they're getting out of bed in the morning. So, should this be something that ordinary people worry about? Should our intelligence agencies be trying to restrict these products in the American marketplace to, protect us from, maybe some of these threats that we don't generally imagine every day?
Yeah, Jeff, I'd say from a general public standpoint, I take the stance of kind of keep calm and carry on. You can use these devices, but take precautions when you do know what you're getting into. Like, for example, with all the Casa smart home stuff, you think it might just be telemetry data that's going up to the cloud, but they're probably getting automatic updates. Things are always talking, checking in natively. There's like a heartbeat, and just think it's a firmware away from, establishing a tunnel or a backdoor into your home network or into your company. So for me, it's a simple VLAN. I have VLANs for my work stuff, my home stuff, my kids stuff, and I got an IoT VLAN. So I can get some of these, creature comfort devices, things like smart plugs. I can tune them in and then kind of sleep soundly knowing that it's not going to have access to probe and crawl everything else in my network. How about you guys?
Yep, same on my end. I've got a firewall that lets me set up VLANs and create custom rules, put different devices in groups. And so in some regards, I don't have because we got some Amazon devices and the kids have their own tablets and stuff like that they use. So I get to separate those devices in terms of groups, and it kind of almost alleviates the need for VLANs. I still have some VLANs for specific use cases, but as far as like separating rule bases for the grown-up phones versus like the kids, toy tablets that get to have the kid apps and stuff on it. But what I like about the firewall that it has a lot of analytic data built into the software and can give you a really good insight as to like what each device is doing. So having a firewall, like you said, Travis, VLANing out, separating the children, so to speak, is key.
I mean, and in terms of the data itself, I think our job as, security researchers should be more about informing the public about what data these companies might have, what possible risks. But at the end of the day, it is kind of a personal risk question. Like, what are you willing to accept? I think a lot of people tend to not care about a company having their data. They don't see a huge distinction between any of these out-of-country companies versus something in-house like Meta. And I think our job just has to be to inform the public the best we can and explain what this data might be used for. And, it's up to individual people to decide what they are willing to do, whether they're willing to use these products at the end of the day or not.
Kelsey, kind of to go off what you're saying, I feel like we're probably the 0.1% that do have things like VLANs and whatnot to segment these things, whereas, a general person's going to say, hey, I'm going to take this and plug it into my home Wi-Fi where everything is my work laptop, my kid stuff, my refrigerator nowadays, like everything's interconnected, and, get these devices that can kind of chat to whatever and however they can. They can map networks, they get an idea of what's living and breathing out there.
Yeah, and it's hard to expect, an everyday person to have that sort of security set up on a home network. It's just probably not realistic.
Your grandma doesn't have VLANs?
What?
Your grandma doesn't have VLANs?
No. No. I'm not sure even explaining the concept would go well. But yeah, I mean, I think the bigger issue is that a lot of people don't even know there could be a risk by using, a smart plug or something like that. I think people are still not, using USBs at airports and stuff. People are still doing that and don't understand that there's a risk there. So it's how do you protect yourself if you don't know there's an issue? So I think our job just really needs to be informing.
I think the problem, though, is even the 1% of us who might have the facility to look. In my case, I've got some TP-Link hardware on my network. I know, at least when I was watching, that it's not calling home because it's not my edge device. And I can, look at the contract table and I can see every connection that's set up. And I know my switch isn't talking to anybody on the outside, or it wasn't at that point, but it doesn't automatically update firmware. But if it was something that did, how would I, like Travis said, it's always one firmware update away from establishing a tunnel home or something like that. And even those of us who have the equipment and the facility and the knowledge to know what we're looking at, if we are watching, are any of us watching on a daily basis? I mean, I tend not to look at stuff unless I've introduced a new device on my network or something is wrong. I don't have a SIM at home. So I wonder, while eventually they would get caught and it would burn the asset, if there was an espionage angle to any of this stuff, could they release that malicious firmware packet and get away with it for quite some time, like we saw with like SolarWinds and things like that? I mean, how long was that vulnerability out there and potentially being exploited before anybody actually noticed it? And that was in an environment where people should have been noticing it.
And Jeff, kind of to piggyback off you, is if they were doing something, I know with like advanced C2s, most of these are Linux boxes anyway, so they could write like a little Berkeley packet filter and make it so it doesn't even hit your network stack as far as what they're doing, what they're looking for. Maybe it's a botnet between other, smart plugs in the neighborhood and kind of a spider web effect and send it out another path. But there are ways for them to mask traffic or tunnel it through other traffic to really kind of do what they want to. I'm thinking of nefarious and kind of tinfoil hat right now, but those possibilities are out there. We've seen other threat actors do that. TrustedSec has got capabilities and C2 frameworks of doing things like that. So, it's not a matter of is it possible? It is possible, right?
Right. I mean, certainly. I mean, you look at all sorts of protocols like ICE, STUN, things like that. There's a lot of traffic that on most home networks that really you can't identify well. If you've got a smart TV or something like that, it's probably hopeless to know really who it's talking to and when.
I miss the days where my refrigerator didn't want to call out and you didn't need to sign an acceptable use policy to, microwave something or a TV. I miss those devices.
So has anyone actually heard like credible rumblings? I mean, we had the Wall Street Journal for a couple of years insisting that Supermicro was spying, for example, and nobody ever really produced the goods on that one. They, to my knowledge, haven't retracted the story, but it hasn't really gone anywhere. There's been no placing them on the entity list or anything like that has happened with some of these other organizations. Have any of these guys actually been caught red-handed in an espionage activity, or does anybody know of any like credible evidence to suggest that they are actively doing that and there is something nefarious going on?
I haven't heard of anything specifically that is credible saying we pinpointed this, they've been taking this data. I just draw my own theories based on what you have seen, like the pager attack overseas and whatnot, knowing that they have ability to target certain things in certain ways. And maybe it's not a matter of if they can, but when or what they could do with those things. Again, the theory is there, and we've seen it used in other fashions, but I'm not saying my home router is going to blow up anytime soon, but capabilities of things like that.
Well, I mean, that's a good point, though. The pager attack is a fabulous example of why, these supply chain attacks are not really just theoretical. There has been one in the real world. And if you think about the pager attack specifically, there was a lot of physical challenge in that in terms of distributing explosives that can be detected chemically, things that potentially could get taken apart and observed. And, those pagers had to stand up to at least some amount of scrutiny. And that's why I wonder. It's easy to say, nobody could ever get away with, putting malicious firmware on millions of home routers, and we'd see the network activity and stuff. But I'm not so sure.
On that topic, I do have a book to recommend for anyone who's interested in the subject called Sandworm, sort of about attacks that we might not expect. It goes into a lot of details of attacks on heating systems and nuclear substations and that sort of thing. It's an interesting book on the subject of it's not always just your app might be hacked. There's other things in our day-to-day life that we don't initially expect to be a forum for, a malicious hacker or something like that could really be affected.
And Kelsey, that's where that larger spider web of telemetry data can come into. Maybe you're not the target, but you're helping create that OSINT around creating that environment for them to map out where they want to go. Again, theory, but everyone contributes in that fashion.
That sounds like some light reading for Sunday afternoon.
It's actually it's a really easy read. It's written in a good way. If it's not too bad, it's not too dense. It's by Andy Greenberg is the author. So if anyone's interested, I recommend it.
So Sandworm, Andy Greenberg. Okay. All right. Well, is it time to talk TikTok then?
I think it's time to talk TikTok, yes.
How many more TikTok and time jokes can I work into this? All right. Clearly, there have been a lot of criticisms of the platform. Many people suggest it is an intelligence gathering operation. A lot of people have suggested it's, used to propagandize the public. It's been suggested it's a psyop to seed social division. And some have even claimed it's a plot to damage the attention spans of young people and more. So we do know, from the data that has been gathered, if you look at like political exit polls and market research, purchasing decisions that come out of that and things like that, those sources indicate that people are definitely influenced by TikTok. In many cases, they're getting information that they're acting on through the platform. That is a lot of power to place in foreign hands. Thus we have PAF-ACA, which is the Protecting Americans from Foreign Adversary Controlled Applications Act. That has so far survived some initial court tests. So as far as the is it legal question, that seems to be settled, at least for now, but does it go far enough?
I think kind of similar to the IoT stuff we were talking about. A lot of this, I don't know if it can be governed or should be governed because people are going to do kind of what they want or scratch the itch, if you will. I think if you're feeding it to your 6-year-old son and letting them go on TikTok for hours of the day, that's kind of on you as a parent. Me, I know how to kind of curtail my consumption of it. But is it influential? Yeah, I just baked a sourdough loaf today because I watched Sourdough Moms and Guitar Licks on TikTok. That's my algorithm. So yeah, it's influential, but I kind of know how to pull away, and I feel like have a good gauge of whether I'm getting fed something or not. And so I kind of choose to consume, but I don't post. How about you guys? Do you guys use it?
I don't, but my spouse does. And, we kind of go back and forth because I still use, the elder millennial platforms. So Instagram and YouTube Reels and things like that.
YouTube Reels?
For guitar licks like Travis.
I thought they were YouTube Shorts, Facebook Reels.
They are shorts.
Facebook, Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts. My bad. But
it's okay, Skylar. Like me, you've got enough gray that we're not the target market for TikTok.
It's a good thing I shaved. Yeah, my gray's showing. Anyway, we often compare like what the algorithm's feeding my spouse versus what my algorithm's feeding me. And the TikTok algorithm is, just chef's kiss. That algorithm is very well developed, well organized, well maintained. And to kind of piggyback off what Travis was talking about, how it's kind of the onus is on the user, right? It shouldn't be on a governing body to determine what somebody can and can't use and who gets access to what data. However, I do kind of think, kind of like how we have content ratings on media, on physical media, mature TV, Y7, things like that. I think having some sort of warning system or labeling of applications like that, TikTok, it was owned by a company that was based out of Texas, but then like the parent company was ByteDance, right? So while a lot of the analysis showed that like yeah, there wasn't really data leaking from the US data center for this application, going back to the onus being on the user, look at what happened when we just had a ban for just a few hours. People were manually and side channel loading the actual what was it, Red Note? Was that
Yeah,
the
Red
actual
Note. So
Chinese
that
app?
one's straight up Chinese TikTok.
Yeah.
Exactly, Skylar. Yeah.
And what came out of that was a lot of realization on both Chinese users and American users that the algorithm that Taylor's like, because the Chinese government does filter what the Chinese people can access on the internet. So they were starting to see American users posting on their platform, and they were seeing like, oh, things are different than what we've been seeing in our algorithm, and vice versa. So there was a lot of open communication. And again, some of my comments I'll save for the end.
Well, I'll react a little bit to that real fast. I mean, we do have COPA and some of the earlier laws, that would restrict very young children under 13 and stuff from
Right.
from using TikTok. That would apply kind of generically to any social media. I guess I'll kind of agree that adults ought to be free to do what they want to do, but at the same time, I think the internet poses a unique problem in that it doesn't allow a lot of really effective controls. Not controls that ordinary people can implement. Take all these connected devices, for instance, you don't have access to the trust store on them. So how can you even begin to run an effective web filter? So, I mean, yes, if your children are small enough that you stand over their shoulder the whole time while they're online, sure. But as soon as they step out of the house or use any connected device anywhere, nah.
I'll say I do use TikTok quite a bit, as do most of my friends. And Skylar, to go off what you said, the algorithm from Instagram to TikTok is remarkably different. TikTok's algorithm is agile in a way that Instagram's isn't, but they both incentivize for you to engage. So in the sense that it's manipulating you towards outrage and engagement, because that's what gets the most clicks. So I definitely have seen, just as it became more popular, people's language changes. It's affected, especially, the Gen Z generation, how we talk. People, just to give an example, don't say kill anymore, they say unalive. The TikTok censors specifically don't allow language like that. And so American language has changed because of that. So I don't think TikTok is a universal good by any means. But at the same time, I question whether we should be infringing on an individual person's right to use an application. There's a lot of people that find community on there. There's a lot of businesses that survive entirely off of TikTok. Small businesses are propped up by this free advertising platform. So I think we have to be there is a fine line of protecting American people while also not infringing on their right to free speech and free use.
My take on that is that TikTok's not the only one doing this. Now, I get the concern of it being, overall owned by a foreign entity. However, the platform that, is kind of like the rally cry of the people that are trying to get ByteDance to sell it off, they're not doing anything that Meta, YouTube, or, Google, they're not doing anything that no other social media platform is doing. They're not doing anything over that. There's nothing special about it. And I think the only reason why we're kind of focused on this is the algorithm. The tech companies that profit off of our data and the algorithm giving us a tailored experience to either influence us or to get us to engage, which gets more advertising. They just want the algorithm. That's in my opinion, that's the only reason why this is a thing at this point, because there was no evidence that foreign entities were consuming the data off of TikTok.
And just about the algorithm, to the extent that people are worried that it's manipulating the American people, we've known Meta to do that in the past. They've admitted it. And you don't need to control the algorithm to do that manipulation. Like, not to use too much of a hot topic, but are you guys in on the Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively lawsuit? The big allegation of them using all kinds of bots and all kinds of, fake accounts to, stoke outrage. The algorithm is an easier way to do it. It's more direct, but if you want to manipulate through the internet, you can do it.
Well, that's though them hiring PR firms to go out there and actively astroturf, though.
Sure. And you don't, but that, my point is, if the Chinese government wanted to do that on Meta, they totally could.
Okay. I mean, yes, and we've seen some evidence that foreign actors have done that, but it's also readily identifiable when that's happening versus, if they're just subtly tweaking an algorithm to select viewpoints that are already out there organically, but amplifying them in a way that doesn't reflect real public opinion.
Yeah, the algorithm is definitely more a direct way to, push down other points of view as well as, uplift points of view that are maybe more useful to you, for sure.
Controlled exposure is kind of what I say. It's like knowing you're being fed the BS and move on.
Yeah, and coming back to what we were talking about, monitoring our home network and things like that, and Kelsey, what you were saying about just doing what we can to educate the masses. Travis, you're exactly right. It's knowing what's BS and knowing what's not, and understanding if you can go into a social media platform knowing you're going to be fed about 75-80% BS, and then the other 20%-ish is going to be maybe things that pertain to you or things that are substantial, I guess. I have seen a huge shift just in the last year, and really in the last couple of months, just waves of new sponsored content with influencers. So now that it's kind of a no holds barred on what people can do and post on the internet, we're seeing a huge push from big companies reaching out to influencers, trying to peddle wares and things like that. You kind of have to understand, it's like, okay, well, some of the channels or some of the people, influencers that I used to follow or do follow, as they get bigger, I mean, you see football players and other celebrities, they start doing ads. Same thing with the people that you saw starting out on Facebook or YouTube or Instagram, the small people that got a little bit of a following and then they got bigger, and then advertisers were sending them free things. It's like, oh, this is cool. A lot of cool things are happening. Now we're getting into causes. Now we're getting into my favorite people that I watch on my algorithm. Now they're bought. And so I have to be careful about what I take from those people,
Well, I think I've kind of heard it from all three of you now in some respect, which is control. I control my consumption. I know what's going on. I know what they're doing. But isn't that, the equivalent of every addict at some point said, I can quit whenever I want to?
Social media addiction is totally a thing. Trust me, I don't dismiss it. And I think part of the reason the influencers, the marketing and stuff that can be done, whether that's for a political viewpoint or for a product, is because when you're looking at an influencer and they're talking to you from their bedroom, it's much harder to dismiss a person that you feel like a parasocial connection with than it is like some amorphous advertising company. It can be insidious when you get a connection with someone over TikTok and you're following their content and then they say something that you maybe don't agree with, but you listen because this is a person you trust. Like this sort of many-to-many social media inherently has some pitfalls, for sure.
So if we concede potential for social media addiction is at least real, there's some evidence to suggest it's a thing. And
I'm willing to say right now that I've got an issue.
And we acknowledge the influential and social power of it. Isn't that enough of a justification to say we shouldn't let a foreign entity control the supply?
As long as they keep giving me my sourdough and my guitar licks, I'm happy.
I don't know. Personally, I am more on the side of, individual choice. Usually that's just my stance on things. I absolutely think if you can talk to the people in your own life, you're concerned about their social media and maybe how much TikTok is influencing them, I think that's on us to take care of our neighbors and take care of our friends and our family, less than it is on, there being a law about it. But that's my my personal opinion.
So there is a law. So I think it's time we should probably go through the kind of timeline of events that have led us to where we are now before we continue the conversation. Going back to August of 2020, then President Trump signed an executive order requiring that ByteDance divest of TikTok. The outcome, of course, was a court challenge. And in September, the court did provide relief and prevented that from going into effect. In 2021, the Biden administration kind of reviewed the situation, and I believe the outcome of that review was, again, to reverse the previous executive order and allow ByteDance to retain ownership. I don't know that they had a whole lot of choice on that front, but nonetheless, that's when Congress then stepped in and actually passed PA-FACA. That law was aimed at addressing the national security concerns regarding potential Chinese government influence through the platform. That brings us up to around now, January 19th. The deadline for divestment is reached. ByteDance briefly turns TikTok off. Everybody freaks out and starts paying $1,000 on eBay for phones that have TikTok already loaded on them.
It's crazy. It's so crazy.
About that same time, I think Kevin O'Leary, also known as Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank, publicly announced he was going to offer $20 billion in cash to acquire the platform. Then, of course, January 2020, President Trump takes office again and at least puts in an executive order that... It's right, 2025? Apologize. He releases an executive order, of course, that says, I know what year it is. No, that basically allows them to have a 75-day extension period. And that's, still kind of in process right now. I believe that same day, Jimmy Donaldson, who I think is Mr. Beast, probably, or at least most well known as Mr. Beast, said that he was also bidding with some other investors to acquire TikTok. I believe that's still outstanding. And finally, I think most recently on the 9th of February here, just a few days ago, Elon Musk has basically made a statement that he is not interested in purchasing TikTok. So that brings us to today. Where do we think this is going? I mean, my instinct is no deal gets done. We hit the end of that 75 days and, ByteDance temporarily turns TikTok off again, and then somebody comes out of the woodwork and pays them full price.
Yeah, I don't see it happening. And if you just take it away, people are going to flock to other alternatives like Rednote. And what good's that going to do? It's going to be the same problem, just compounded more. And I trust probably China more than Kevin O'Leary. So.
Yeah, I think it's going to be in limbo for a while. This is, a political minefield too. Like, it's just such a sensitive subject for people that I think not talking about it is going to be a big thing, because there is not a good answer.
Well, now time for me to talk politically here. So my main comment is, look at who's offering to buy it. That's all. Like, really, you have people like Mr. Beast and Kevin O'Leary. It's a numbers game. They just want the algorithm. It has nothing to do with keeping the data, in America, or keeping foreign entities from getting it. It is literally, they just want the algorithm. Anybody that buys it, TikTok's gone, and they're going to import the algorithm.
I think they want the data.
Well, obviously, yeah, the data is insanely valuable too. Like, if they have an entire user database from TikTok and the algorithm, I now have the algorithm to keep you on my platform, and I have all the data that I need to properly sell you things, to sell that data to advertisers, but still on my platform. It's,
I do think you're right, and the algorithm itself is pretty valuable too. Just because, YouTube, Instagram, they haven't been able to match it. They haven't.
And I was only on TikTok I am speaking literally here, I was on TikTok for an hour before I deleted my account. Much like World of Warcraft, but that's for another episode. But I got to like a level 8 Buffalo woman and I got bored.
Well, let me ask you something, Kelsey.
Yeah. Mm.
Is it really the algorithm, or is it just network effect? I mean, is it because everybody's already on TikTok that TikTok is better, or do you actually believe they have something that Instagram, YouTube Shorts don't?
So I actually use Instagram more than I use TikTok, because I tend to use social media for connection with my actual friends more. So in terms of looking to just scroll, TikTok is better. And you do see this a lot of the same content reproduced on Instagram a couple days later. Things get cross-posted, but there is some content that just doesn't migrate, that seems to just stay on TikTok. And there's certainly part of it that, yeah, all the stuff is happening there, so you want to be there, because when a meme hits or something like that and everyone is, making the same jokes, you want to be part of that. But in terms of personal network, Instagram is better for that for me, but TikTok certainly has more content. But I'm not sure that matters because it's infinite anyway on either platform. You never get to the end of a scroll.
Yep.
All right. Well, we're going to have to leave it there. I want to thank our guests, Kelsey and Travis, for joining us today, and I want to thank you all for listening to Security Noise, which is a production of TrustedSec. If your organization has any questions or needs information security assistance, you can go to www.trustedsec.com. We'll see you next time.